Apply. Imagine a world where mighty empires once thrived, where grand cities rose from the earth, and where knowledge, power, and culture flourished like never before. Apply. Then suddenly they were gone, entire civilizations erased from history's canvas, leaving behind only scattered ruins, silent walls, and unanswered mysteries. Who were they? Apply. How did they live? And what force powerful enough could wipe them away without a trace? Tonight, Apply. We journey deep into the heart of forgotten history to uncover the rise and fall of the world's most fascinating civilizations that mysteriously disappeared. Apply. From colossal stone cities hidden in jungles to powerful kingdoms swallowed by sand and sea. The past is calling and the walls of history are ready to speak. Apply. The Mayan collapse remains one of the most puzzling and haunting mysteries in the pages of human history. Picture it, vast cities carved out of the heart of Central America. Apply. Towering pyramids rising toward the heavens and plazas where thousands gathered for rituals, games, and ceremonies. The Maya were visionaries, mathematicians, astronomers, engineers, Apply, and artists who achieved what seemed impossible for their time. They charted the stars with uncanny precision, created one of the most sophisticated calendars the world had ever seen, Apply, and built urban centers that rivaled anything in Europe at the time. Their society thrived centuries, stretching across present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. Then Apply. Suddenly, like a candle snuffed out in the night, their empire crumbled. The great cities that once pulsed with life were abandoned, left silent to be swallowed by vines, earth, and time. Apply. Archaeologists have long searched for answers, piecing together fragments of stone inscriptions, skeletal remains, and the ruined architecture that still defies centuries of decay. Apply. Theories abound, each one more chilling than the last. Some suggest the Maya overexploited their land, cutting down forests for farming and fuel until the soil itself gave up. Apply. Others believe devastating droughts struck with relentless force, drying rivers, withering crops, and turning once thriving farmland into barren wasteland. There are whispers, too, Apply, of internal conflict, city-states warring endlessly against one another, draining resources and shattering the unity that once held the civilization together. Apply. Still others argue disease may have swept across the region, leaving entire communities lifeless and unable to recover. They'll apply. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is that no single answer has been found. Imagine walking through the ruins of Tikal, where temples rise above the treetops. Apply, yet the courtyards below stand empty, echoing with nothing but the wind. Imagine Copan, once a vibrant hub of art and culture, now silent. Apply, its carved stone stela staring blankly into eternity. These are not the ruins of a civilization destroyed in a single battle or consumed overnight by some catastrophic event. Instead, Apply. It feels as if the Maya simply walked away, vanishing from their cities and leaving the world to wonder why. The Maya didn't disappear completely, of course. Apply. Their descendants still live in Central America, carrying with them fragments of the culture, the language, and the traditions of their ancestors. Apply. Yet the Golden Age, the empire that once dominated Mesoamerica, collapsed in a way that feels almost ghostly. It is this blend of survival and loss that makes their story so haunting. Apply. We can still hear echoes of their chants, see the remnants of their art, and decipher the stories etched into their stone monuments. But the great question remains, Apply. What forced one of the most brilliant civilizations in human history to abandon its heart? Some researchers believe climate was the final, decisive blow. Apply. Sediment samples taken from ancient lake beds reveal evidence of severe, prolonged droughts that may have stretched on for decades. Without rain, crops withered. Apply. And hunger would have gnawed at the foundations of their society. When famine rises, so too do desperation, war, and unrest. Others point to the inscriptions carved into Maya monuments. Apply. Some of which tell stories of rival kings locked in constant warfare, desperate for power even as their people struggle to survive. Apply. These competing theories weave a picture of a society under immense pressure, facing environmental collapse, political instability, and social upheaval all at once. Apply. What makes the Mayan collapse so captivating is not just the mystery of how it happened, but the legacy left behind, the towering temples of Chichen Itza. Apply. The intricate carvings of Palenque. Apply. The mathematical genius that predicted celestial alignments with remarkable accuracy. These achievements remind us that the Maya were not a vanished people, but a civilization that continues to shape our understanding of human potential. Apply. And yet, standing in the shadow of those ancient stones, one cannot escape the eerie silence, a silence that asks the same question every explorer, every scholar, Apply, and every visitor has whispered for centuries, how could a civilization so advanced, so powerful, simply faded into the jungle, leaving only ruins to tell its story? Apply. The Indus Valley civilization is often described as one of humanity's greatest unsolved riddles. Long before the rise of Rome, Apply. Long before the pyramids echoed with the footsteps of pharaohs, a society flourished along the mighty Indus River in what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. Apply. It was a world unlike any other of its time, advanced, organized, and astonishingly modern in ways that leave historians shaking their heads in disbelief. Apply. Imagine sprawling cities with streets laid out in perfect grids, drainage systems that carried waste away with an efficiency that rivaled even some 19th century European towns. Apply. And houses equipped with wells, bathrooms, and even early versions of plumbing. These people were builders of order and symmetry, architects of a vision far ahead of their age. And yet, Apply. Despite this brilliance, they too vanished without leaving behind a clear story of their fall. What makes the Indus Valley so haunting is the silence of its legacy. Unlike the Egyptians, Apply, who left pyramids and hieroglyphs to proclaim their greatness, or the Mesopotamians who recorded their deeds on clay tablets, Apply. The Indus people wrote in a script that still resists decipherment. Thousands of seals and symbols survive, carved into stone and pottery, but their meanings remain locked away. Apply. A code yet to be broken. Without their voices to guide us, we are left to walk through their ruins and guess at their lives. Apply. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa stand as silent guardians of secrets we cannot fully understand. Apply. Archaeologists have uncovered streets wide enough to suggest carts and bustling trade, granaries that hint at surplus and wealth, and evidence of a society that valued hygiene. Apply. Organization and equality. Unlike many other ancient cultures, Apply, there are few signs of grand temples or massive palaces, suggesting that the people may have lived in a system less obsessed with kings and more focused on community. Apply. It's an idea both inspiring and bewildering, a civilization where the collective seems to have mattered more than the individual ruler. And then somewhere around 1900 BCE, Apply, the greatness began to unravel. The bustling cities were gradually abandoned. The once powerful centers of trade and culture fell quiet, their streets empty, their markets deserted. Apply. But unlike Rome, which collapsed in fire and conquest, the Indus cities show little evidence of warfare or destruction. There are no layers of ash, no toppled statues of kings overthrown. Apply. No signs of conquest. It is as though the people simply drifted away, leaving their masterpieces behind to be swallowed by dust and time. Apply. What could have driven such a society to its knees? Scholars have long debated the possibilities. Climate change emerges again as a likely culprit, rivers shifting courses. Apply. Floods alternating with devastating droughts, forcing communities to scatter in search of survival. Some point to overuse of the land. Apply. As agriculture strained the soil and food became scarce. Others suggest invasion, perhaps by nomadic groups moving into the region. Apply, though the evidence for such a conquest is thin at best. Disease, too, is whispered as a possibility, a plague that silently crept through the cities, emptying them of life. Apply. The most haunting thought is that the fall of the Indus Valley was not a single disaster, but a slow erosion. Apply. A civilization quietly unraveling as nature and time pulled thread by thread from its fabric. The people may not have vanished instantly, but migrated gradually. Apply. Dispersing into smaller villages, carrying fragments of their culture with them, until the great cities were nothing more than abandoned skeletons. Apply. Standing today at the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, one can see the ghostly outlines of streets, stairways, and wells. They whisper of lives once vibrant, children playing in courtyards. Apply. Merchants trading goods, artisans carving seals whose meaning we may never know. The silence is almost deafening. Apply. A reminder that even the most advanced societies are fragile before the weight of time. The Indus Valley was not just a civilization, it was a promise. Apply. A glimpse of human ingenuity at its finest. And yet, like so many before and after, it slipped away into the shadows of history. Apply. Leaving behind only questions that may never be fully answered. Long before the first pharaohs raised their mighty temples along the Nile, Apply, there existed a culture hidden deep within the unforgiving deserts of southern Egypt. Apply. It is a place few would expect to find traces of civilization, a barren land where survival itself seems impossible. And yet, in the midst of endless dunes and blistering heat, Apply, archaeologists discovered something extraordinary, not Apply, a mysterious kingdom that thrived thousands of years before the pyramids and then disappeared into the shifting sands. Apply, leaving behind one of history's earliest and most bewildering enigmas. Scattered across this desolate plain are stones carefully arranged into circles, alignments, and patterns. Apply. At first glance, they might appear unremarkable, just rocks half buried in the sand. But closer inspection reveals intention, design, and meaning. Apply. Some of these stone structures are aligned with the stars, tracking the movement of the sun and marking the arrival of the summer solstice. Long before Stonehenge was ever dreamed of, Apply, the people of Nataplaya were building their own astronomical observatory in the desert, using the sky as their calendar and compass. Apply. This was not a wandering tribe scraping out an existence. This was a culture with knowledge, purpose, and vision. Apply. Archaeologists believe Nabata-Playa flourished between 7,000 and 5,000 years ago, during a time when this part of the Sahara was not the lifeless desert we know today. Apply. Seasonal rains turned the basin into a lake, creating an oasis where people could settle, farm, and raise livestock. They were early pioneers of organized society, herding cattle. Apply. Trading goods and gathering for rituals that blended survival with spirituality. The stone circles, some suggest, apply, may have been ceremonial sites where rituals to the gods of the sun and sky were performed, or perhaps even early attempts at mapping the heavens. But then, apply, as mysteriously as they appeared, the people of Nada Playa vanished. The rains stopped, the climate shifted, what had once been a fertile lake gradually dried into dust. Apply, and the desert began its slow conquest. Life in this land became impossible, and the kingdom that had thrived here faded into obscurity. Apply, unlike the pyramids or the grand temples of later Egypt, the monuments of Nada Playa were left half buried in sand, forgotten by time, waiting thousands of years to be rediscovered. Apply, their disappearance raises unsettling questions. Did the people of Nada Playa simply migrate, scattering into other regions and blending with cultures along the Nile? Apply, were they ancestors of the Egyptians, carrying with them the seeds of knowledge that would later bloom into one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known? Apply, or did their society collapse entirely, swallowed by the desert without leaving behind hairs to carry their memory? The answers are still hidden beneath layers of time. Apply, guarded by the silence of the Sahara. What makes Nada Playa so haunting is not only its mystery, but its significance. It challenges our understanding of history. For centuries, apply, we believed Egypt's greatness began with the rise of the pharaohs. But these stones, older than the pyramids, whisper another story that long before the Nile's dynasties. Apply, people here were already looking to the stars, already seeking patterns in the heavens, already building monuments to eternity. Apply. Nada Playa is a reminder that civilizations rise not only along fertile rivers and green valleys, but also in places where human determination defies the harshness of nature. Today, apply. When the desert winds sweep across the ruins, one can almost imagine the rituals that once unfolded there, the flicker of fire against the night sky. Apply, the voices of people chanting to gods whose names are lost, the silent turning of the stars above them. And then comes the silence, the same silence that has lasted for millennia. Apply, holding tight the secrets of a people who once carved order out of chaos, only to vanish without a trace. Nada Playa is more than an ancient ruin. Apply, it is a mystery wall between what we know of human beginnings and the stories still waiting to be uncovered beneath the sands in the humid lowlands of present-day Mexico. Apply, long before the rise of the Aztecs and centuries before the grandeur of the Maya, there flourished a civilization that would become known as the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Apply, the Olmecs, mysterious, innovative, and powerful, emerged nearly 3,000 years ago, shaping a world whose influence would ripple far beyond their time. Apply. Their legacy lies in massive stone heads carved with astonishing skill, artifacts that still gaze silently across jungles and fields, challenging us with their size, their detail, apply, and their mystery. Yet just as suddenly as they appeared, this remarkable civilization faded into obscurity, leaving behind only fragments of its story, a puzzle history has yet to solve. Apply, the Olmecs were master builders and artists, creators of a society that thrived between 1500 and 400 BCE. Apply, they occupied the swampy coastlines and fertile river valleys of the Gulf of Mexico, turning a challenging environment into the foundation of a flourishing culture. Apply, they engineered drainage systems to control floods, raised earthen mounds and ceremonial centers, and established trade networks that stretched across hundreds of miles. Apply, their jade figurines, intricate carvings, and colossal sculptures reveal a people who valued symbolism, ritual, apply, and the art of shaping raw materials into eternal expressions of power and belief. Most famous of all are the colossal stone heads, monuments carved from single basalt boulders. Apply, some weighing over 40 tons, transported across miles of jungle and swamp without the wheel or beasts of burden. Each head bears a unique face, perhaps portraits of rulers. Apply, their stern expressions immortalized in stone. To stand before one of these giants is to feel the weight of authority and the permanence of memory. Yet the questions remain. Apply, who are these rulers? How did a society without advanced tools move and sculpt such massive stones with such precision? And why, after achieving so much, did the Olmecs disappear? Apply, the Olmecs also left behind tantalizing glimpses of a complex belief system. They carved symbols of jaguars, serpents, and hybrid creatures, figures that may represent gods, shamans, apply, or mythic beings that bridge the natural and spiritual worlds. Many scholars believe they developed one of the earliest forms of ritual ball games. Apply, a practice later carried on by the Maya and Aztecs. Their influence is visible in the very foundations of Mesoamerican culture, hieroglyphic writing systems, calendars. Apply, monumental architecture, and ceremonial centers can all be traced back to ideas first nurtured in Olmec lands. And then around 400 BCE, the Olmec centers fell silent. Apply, the great ceremonial cities of San Lorenzo and La Venta, once bustling with ritual and trade, were abandoned. The colossal heads remained. Apply. But the people who had built them seemed to vanish into the jungle mist. Archaeologists still debate the causes of their decline. Apply. Some point to environmental change, rivers shifting courses, floods or volcanic eruptions that devastated farmland and forced communities to disperse. Others suggest internal conflict. Apply. Social unrest or external invasions that shattered their unity. Like the Mayans centuries later, the Olmecs may not have disappeared overnight but gradually dissolved. Apply. Their culture absorbed into neighboring groups who carried fragments of their traditions into the future. What makes their disappearance so haunting is the silence they left behind. Apply. And like the Maya, who covered their temples and inscriptions, or the Aztecs, whose stories were preserved by conquest, the Olmecs left us no decipherable records. Their script, apply, if it existed, has not survived, leaving us to piece together their world from stones, artifacts, and ruins. They were pioneers. Apply, builders of a blueprint that future civilizations would inherit, and yet they remain shadows present in influence but absent in detail. Today, apply. As archaeologists unearth new Olmec sites and uncover artifacts buried for millennia, we are reminded of how much we do not know. Apply. The Olmecs were not a footnote in history. They were a spark, the first great flame of Mesoamerican civilization. Their art, their monuments, apply, and their mysteries are the stones of a wall that still stands, though much of it lies hidden beneath vines and earth. Apply. To walk among their colossal heads is to stare into the eyes of a forgotten people, to feel their presence in silence, and to wonder how a civilization so groundbreaking could vanish. Apply, leaving only giants of stone to guard their secrets, high in the mesas and deep within the canyons of the American Southwest. Apply, traces of a vanished civilization cling to the cliffs like echoes of another age. The ancestral Pueblones, often called the Anasazi, were master builders of stone and sky. Apply, carving entire communities into sheer canyon walls and raising towers that seemed to touch the heavens. For centuries they thrived in a harsh, arid landscape. Apply, creating a culture that blended ingenuity, resilience, and spirituality in ways that still astound us today. Yet, just as their society reached its peak, something happened. Apply, their great cities were abandoned, their cliff dwellings left silent, and the people disappeared into history's shadows, leaving behind only haunting ruins and unanswered questions. Apply, the ancestral Pueblones emerged nearly 2,000 years ago, developing a way of life perfectly suited to the deserts of what is now Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. Apply, they were farmers coaxing corn, beans, and squash from the unforgiving earth. They were engineers constructing intricate irrigation systems to guide precious water through the desert. Apply, and they were architects of genius, shaping stone, timber, and clay into dwellings that defy imagination even today. In places like Mesa Verde, apply, towering sandstone cliffs hide entire villages within their alcos, multi-storied complexes of rooms, plazas, and ceremonial chambers known as kivas. From a distance, apply, they look almost like parts of the rock itself, as though the earth opened its arms and embraced a people who knew how to live in balance with it. At Chaco Canyon, apply, the ancestral Pueblones built something even more extraordinary, great houses of stone rising 4 and 5 stories high, some with hundreds of rooms. Apply, aligned precisely with celestial events. Sunlight streaming through doorways and windows marked solstices and equinoxes. Apply, evidence of an advanced understanding of astronomy and a culture deeply connected to the cosmos. The canyon became a hub of trade, ritual, and power. Apply, linked to faraway regions by roads stretching like arteries across the desert. Archaeologists have found seashells from the Pacific, turquoise ornaments, apply, and even macaw feathers from Central America. Proof that these people were not isolated but part of a vast and vibrant network of exchange. And then around the late 1200s, apply, the story shifts. The great houses of Chaco were left to the winds. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde and countless other sites were abandoned. Apply, what had once been bustling centers of life, ritual, and culture stood empty, as though their inhabitants had simply vanished into thin air. Apply. But unlike a sudden cataclysm that erases all traces, this disappearance feels more like a slow unraveling. There are signs of conflict, burned structures, defensive positions. Apply, skeletons bearing wounds from violence. There is evidence of severe droughts, decades when rains failed and crops withered, making survival a desperate struggle. Hunger, warfare, apply, and social upheaval may have combined to push the people away from their ancestral homes. The mystery deepens because their descendants still walk among us. Apply, the modern Pueblo peoples of the Southwest, the Hopi, Zuni, and others carry traditions, stories, and practices that link them to the ancestral Pueblones. For them, apply, these cliff dwellings and great houses are not empty ruins, but sacred places, reminders of a journey their ancestors once made. They tell of migrations, of spiritual quests. Apply, of the need to move on when balance with nature was broken. In their voices, the disappearance is not an end, but a transformation, a turning of one chapter into another. Yet, apply. For the outside world, the abandoned cities remain profoundly haunting. To stand beneath the towering cliffs of Mesa Verde, staring at the silent windows of homes carved into stone, applies to feel both awe and unease. The wind whistles through doorways that once echoed with laughter, ceremony, and life. The sun paints shadows across walls that once sheltered generations. Apply. And in that silence lingers the eternal question, why did they leave? Perhaps it was drought, perhaps conflict. Apply. Perhaps a spiritual calling that led them to seek new homes and new horizons. Whatever the reason, apply. Ancestral Puebloans remind us that even the most ingenious societies are vulnerable to the forces of nature and time. Their stone walls still cling to the cliffs. Apply. Their roads still cross the desert. Their kivas still whisper of prayers spoken to the stars. But their story, like so many others, apply, ends in mystery, an unfinished chapter in the book of human history, written not in words but in stone, silence, and sky. On the northern Horn of Africa, apply, where the Red Sea narrows into a gateway between continents, once stood a kingdom of immense power and dazzling influence, the Kingdom of Axum. Today it lies half buried in silence. Apply. Its greatness reduced to scattered ruins, towering stone obelisks, and fragments of a story almost erased from memory. But there was a time, nearly 2,000 years ago, apply, when Axum was one of the world's great empires, a crossroads of trade, culture, and religion that connected Africa with Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean. Apply. Its ships sailed across seas, its merchants grew rich on gold, ivory, and spices. Apply, and its kings stamped coins that bore their likeness, symbols of a realm that believed its influence was destined to endure. And then, without warning, apply, the kingdom dissolved into history's shadows, leaving us to wonder how such magnificence could vanish almost without a trace. At its height, Axum was unmatched in East Africa. Apply, its capital city, also called Axum, was a marvel of architecture and engineering. Apply, towering stone stelae, monuments reaching as high as 100 feet into the sky, stood like silent sentinels, some weighing hundreds of tons. Apply, carved with intricate designs that mimicked multi-storied palaces. These obelisks, erected without mortar, remain among the most extraordinary structures of the ancient world. Apply, still defying time and gravity. Beneath them, kings were entombed. Apply, their graves filled with treasures that testified to the wealth of a people whose reach extended far beyond their borders. Trade was the lifeblood of Axum. Apply, positioned at a strategic point between Africa, Arabia, and Asia, it controlled the flow of goods through the Red Sea. Merchants from distant lands came seeking ivory, frankincense, salt, apply, and gold, while Axum imported silks, spices, and glassware. Its ports, bustling with ships, were vital links in the chain of global commerce. Roman, Indian, apply, and Persian records mention Axum with respect, describing it as one of the four great powers of its time, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. This was no isolated kingdom. Apply, it was an empire that connected worlds. But Axum was more than a hub of trade. It was a center of faith and culture. Around the 4th century, King Ezana embraced Christianity. Apply, making Axum one of the earliest kingdoms to officially adopt the faith. Churches were built, crosses carved into stone. Apply, and the kingdom's identity forever tied to a religion that still thrives in Ethiopia today. Apply, this moment marked Axum as not only a political and economic giant, but also a spiritual beacon, one that influenced cultures far beyond its borders. And yet, despite this power, apply, the kingdom began to unravel. By the 7th century, new forces rose that shifted the balance of the ancient world. The rise of Islam transformed trade networks across the Red Sea. Apply, redirecting wealth and influence away from Axum's ports. Gradually, the lifeblood of commerce slowed and the once thriving markets grew quiet. Apply, environmental change may have compounded the crisis. Evidence suggests soil exhaustion, deforestation, and shifting climate patterns that made farming more difficult. Isolation, too, apply, played a role. Cut off from much of its trade, Axum became increasingly vulnerable, unable to sustain the empire it had once commanded with pride. By the 10th century, apply, Axum had faded almost completely. The great stela still pierced the sky, but the palaces and markets around them fell into ruin. Its story slipped into legend. Apply, half forgotten until travelers and archaeologists pieced together its past centuries later. Unlike Rome or Egypt, whose ruins dominate the imagination, apply, Axum remains strangely absent from much of the world's history books, as though its greatness was deliberately hidden behind a wall of time. Yet, apply, for those who walk among the towering obelisks today, the silence is overwhelming. You can almost feel the hum of ancient markets. Apply, the prayers whispered in the first Christian churches of Africa, the pride of a kingdom that believed it stood among the giant aunts of the world. And then comes the haunting realization, apply, that even the mightiest empires can vanish, leaving behind only stones pointing skyward, as if still yearning for eternity. Apply, the Kingdom of Axum is a reminder that history's walls are full of missing chapters, stories written in glory erased in silence. Apply, and rediscovered only when we dare to listen to what the ruins still have to say.